most of the human remains we exhumed were those of children. And one needed to be very focused on that. So we did that. But of course, it remained present the question that Mercedes produces here in the clip we saw, what it would be like to come back to this place and create art.
Good afternoon. I'm Susan Spurlock, Executive Director of Ford Hall Forum at Suffolk University, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this afternoon's program in which we welcome back to the Forum internationally recognized award-winning playwright Catherine Filleul, who has been writing about human rights and social justice for over 25 years. Today, we will introduce you to her new one-person play, Under the Skin, about internationally acclaimed visual artist and human rights activist, Claudia Bernardi. Tony Shapiro Pym will moderate this afternoon's conversation. I'd like to thank GBH Forum Network, this afternoon's co-host and producer, and the Lowell Institute, whose generous funding makes events like this possible. It is now my pleasure to tell you more about our moderator, Tony Shapiro Pym. She's an associate professor and assistant director of the program in Peace Building and the Arts at Brandeis University. Tony is a cultural anthropologist and dance ethnologist whose research, writing, community work, and teaching focus on the history and cultural context of the arts in discrete regions of the world, particularly in relation to genocide, conflict, transformation, and gender. Her documentary film, Because of the War, shares the stories of women survivors of Liberia's civil wars, highlighting how those refugees, superstar recording artists, harness the potency of their arts to end violence. Tony, I'm tossing it to you.
Thank you so much, Susan, and welcome everyone. I first met Catherine Filleul many years ago in Cambodia, where we were both working on the arts in the aftermath of the Khmer Rouge genocide. And I met Claudia Bernardi when I invited her to be a guest presenter in a class on creativity, the arts, and social transformation. It was a class I was teaching at Brandeis University. Before that, I had admired her work from afar. I've been lucky and honored to have had opportunities to collaborate with each of them over the years, learning about and experiencing their creativity, their ethics, and their dedication to meaningful, constructive impact in a world of complex challenges. Today, we will be showing clips from and discussing Under the Skin, a new one-person play by Catherine about Claudia, the artist and human rights activist who grew up in Argentina under a military junta. I want to start by giving you some more background about each of our featured speakers. Catherine Filleul is a Franco-American award-winning playwright, writing about human rights and social justice for over 25 years. Her plays have been produced in the United States and internationally. Catherine received the 2019 Barry Lopez Writer in Ethics and Community Fellowship, the 2017 Otto Rene Castillo Award for Political Theater, and the 2015 Planet Activist Award. Catherine is the librettist for 4 produced operas. Her Orlando is the winner of the 2022 Grawemeyer Award. She has an MFA from New York University's Tisch Dramatic Writing Program and a French baccalaureate in philosophy with honors. She is a co-founder of Theater Without Borders and an alumna of New Dramatists. Claudia Bernardi is a socially engaged and community-based artist, printmaker, and installation artist whose artwork is impacted by the effects of war and political violence. Born in Argentina, Bernardi endured the military junta from 1976 to 1983 that resulted in 30,000 desaparecidos. Bernardi participated with the Argentine forensic anthropology team in exhumations investigating human rights violations against civilians. This experience impacted her commitment to community arts. In 2005, Bernardi created the School of Art in Perquin, Walls of Hope, El Salvador, a community-based art project replicated in Colombia and throughout Latin America, Switzerland, Germany, and Northern Ireland. Bernardi is professor of community arts at the California College of the Arts. I'd love to get our conversation started by asking about the genesis of the play Under the Skin. It was commissioned for a virtual workshop, I believe. Would you tell us about that?
Thank you, Tony and Susan and all who made the forum possible. Hello, and thank you everyone for being here today. Yes, the workshop was created for and developed with the actress Mercedes Herrero, our collaborator, whom we'll talk more about. It was commissioned by INTAR, Lou Moreno, artistic director, and Paul Slee Rodriguez, executive director, directed by Elena Araoz, with video designer Milton Cordero. These people became a trusted collaborative team, and we thank them. We'll be showing brief clips of the play to give you a look at the work. I created the play as an intertwined collage, and we hope you'll see the full piece live someday soon.
Thanks, Catherine. How did you become interested in this character and story for this one-person play?
Well, Claudia and I met in Belfast, Northern Ireland in 2011, when we were invited on a peace-building project by Pauline Ross. We knew of each other's work, and while we shared an apartment, we had the opportunity in a relaxed time to talk about life and get to know each other. I began to dream about a one-person play with the character of Claudia, whom I imagined could be played by my friend and colleague, Mercedes Herrero, who had acted in my plays. That was in my imagination, and then it came true.
And Claudia, now turning to you, the character of Claudia in the play says, "The reason I am telling you this story is because of the circumstances." Would you speak about this?
Yes. The comment about the circumstances emerges from many conversations with Catherine, right there on Malone Road in Belfast, where we were sharing the flat. And I think what it was clear to me was that what Catherine was noticing as interesting, or she would ask questions about how can that happen, how this happened, was somehow leaning towards making the story of this person, Claudia, a quite unique story, or something out of the common. And I was vehemently against that from the beginning. I was vehemently against seeing the character or the history of this person as unique, and certainly very, very, very far away from any heroism or uniqueness. I kept on telling Catherine, look, what happened in my life, it's a matter of circumstances. I think if the history of Argentina would have been different, if I had lived in a different history, in a different scenario, I would have a different story to tell. So I think from the very beginning, there was an understanding that the history that was going to be told from the angle of this person selected, being Claudia, it was an opportunity to see a larger constituency of Argentines who were part of my generation that had probably similar stories, or a different story, but it's not about singularities. For me, this play from the beginning was an opportunity to tell the story beyond a personal story of Claudia, and that's what the circumstances come from.
Catherine, do you want to add to that?
Yes, I would love to. I just want to start by saying how beautiful I think what Claudia describes there is for me, and how moving for many reasons. So as a playwright and a storyteller, the circumstances point to a plot, and a plot for the play that I discovered during the creative process. I think of this story as having many, many layers. I myself grew up with immigrant parents. English was not my first language. And I'm attracted to the circumstances that design the trajectory of a life. And also, theater lives through action. And I could tell as we had dinner together and I listened to Claudia's stories, that Claudia's story is one of action.
Thank you. We'll now show clips from the first part of the play. Then we'll continue to talk and later show the second section of clips, which touch more on Claudia's experiences and work regarding Argentina's dirty war and the massacre at El Mozote in El Salvador. Let's take a look.
When spring arrives in our garden, my little sister Patri and I go about eating flowers. We eat the blossoms, the petals, and even the tender leaves, with the total conviction that as time goes by, this early devotion will make us beautiful. I do not know how we got started with this gastronomic practice, nor how we arrive at its cosmetic certainty, but we understand it as a commitment to vanity, which extends for many years, bringing my mother to the point of desperation. All the voices, the places, the smells are compacted together, as if kept tight within a membrane that can burst at any time if I am not careful. Ants are another fascination. We make maps rendering the passages from where the ants circulate. You are both worse than the ants, my mother says, looking up from her sewing. What is certain is that Patri and I have an uncanny comprehension of the subterranean world. Mama gives us scraps of fabric to make the ants' clothing. You are not like the other girls. El Mozote, El Salvador. It is a girl. Inside the dress, in one of the pockets, there is something. Many years later, a reporter calls me at my house in Berkeley, California. Which of the two of you Bernardi sisters is part of the Argentine forensic anthropology team? Oh, Patri and I have both worked on the exhumations with the same concern as my mother. You are atypical sisters, both of you doing such horrendous work. At the end of the military junta, the generals responsible for the disappeared are given amnesty. Many people's job is to destroy. I think it is a fact that many people in the world have the job of destroying. They get up in the morning, try to imagine how to better destroy. The last time I see my mother, I am 16. She is about to go into the operating room. Lying on a stretcher and covering up her great fear with humor, she looks at me and says, "No me olvides. Don't forget me." My grandmother, with her briefcase under her arm, makes her way to the operating room, ignoring the no entry signs. 5 years before my mother, my father dies also at the age of 40. Years after I leave for the US, I am standing at a bus stop in Buenos Aires on a visit. A man steps towards me. Are you a sister of Claudia Bernardi's? No, I am Claudia Bernardi. Claudia, I thought you had disappeared. He had been a friend at the School of Fine Arts, and he had assumed that I was one of the 30,000 disappeared. No, I am an artist in the United States, here on a visit. We look at each other. We exchange phone numbers. We will meet for coffee soon, of course. Neither of us ever call.
So that was a compilation of clips from a reading of the play, the first part of the play. Claudia, the play communicates that from an early age, you and your sister Patricia Bernardi, Patri, had an uncanny comprehension of the subterranean world. Can you please tell us how this may have impacted your sisters and your involvement in exhumations in Argentina and beyond?
Patria and I were fascinated by ants. We had a large garden. We spent a lot of time in the garden. And as the clip that you just saw indicates, we were studious of the different journeys that the ants would take. We would make maps, imagining the journeys going back and forth of the ants. We made tiny little garments for the ants. We made portraits of the ants, and we put everything close to the ant nest. And because the next day those things were not there, we were totally convinced that that which we made for the ants was actually taken and probably appreciated by the ants and of use in the ant nest, which we did not see, but we trusted that they were there. So to speak about a direct relationship with what life would come to be for Patria and for me in connection to exhumations is it's a big leap. I don't know how to make it. But what I can definitely say is that what it is similar, at least in the intention, between those two girls working with the comprehension of what was under the earth and not seen, seems to have points in common to working in exhumations where no one really knows where anything or anyone is at first, but there is the trust, there is the assumption that there is something very valuable to be found, and that very valuable to be found are human remains that are going to be telling a story that has been deliberately silenced for many reasons, and especially by annulling the life of someone. So I imagine that there is a predisposition, perhaps, in these two little girls, familiarity of working with the earth. I do know that for Patria and I, from the elements, right, if we think about water, air, fire, and earth, earth is that which makes us feel more comfortable. We have talked about that. And I think as Patria and I have found ourselves working in exhumations, going through the upper layers of earth and going deeper and deeper, there is this same kind of certainty that we are about to find something that is important and that probably no one knows about or no one knew about, and that we feel we are part of a link of history that starts way beyond us and will continue after us. We are just one link in a history, but that link in this history may be the one that can open up the truth. Clyde Snow, a very renowned forensic anthropologist who in part was the one who trained the Argentine forensic team in Argentina in the first years after the military junta ended, he always said, the bones have stories to tell. And that's absolutely true. And that is very similar to me when I think about the certainty I had that the ants were there having a life of their own, which was about to be revealed to us if we pay attention. And that is probably, in essence, the same sentiment of being a forensic anthropologist, working with total conviction that the skills they have are meaningful to unlock a history that has been deliberately annulled.
Thank you. Claudia, I want to stay with you for a moment more. In the clip we just saw, a friend at a bus stop says he thought you were disappeared. You had been one of the disappeared. Would you speak about that encounter?
Yes, that was a powerful and very moving encounter. I saw this man looking at me with intensity, and I was uncomfortable, but then I was really upset. So I look at him in a, I wouldn't say challenging way, but basically, what do you want, right? and then is when he said, you know, I wouldn't say apologetic, but definitely contained. He said, "Are you Claudia Bernardi's sister?" And I said, "No, I'm Claudia Bernardi." And he looked at me and said what the play collects. "Claudia, I thought you had disappeared." And for me, that was amazing. It was a moment of recognition. He was a friend, not even a friend, he was an acquaintance from the School of Art that I had attended before coming to the US. And the fact that he did not see me, or he had not seen me for a long time, in his mind only could have meant that I was a disappear. And this vignette, I think, is telling, because I am part of a generation that if someone is not being seen for a long time, maybe he or she maybe disappear. In this case, the character of Claudia was well and healthy and living in the United States. But once again, that talks about the circumstances that affected Argentina during the time I was young, during the time I was a student, during the time people would disappear. And, you know, the assumption is if you don't see them, they just may be gone forever. That's what that vignette meant. And I think it's also interesting that we both promise to call each other and see each other and reconnect, and we never did that. And I think it is because it's very difficult to reconceptualize how we deal with memory, how we welcome memory, how we incorporate the memory or the assumptions that memory produce in our lives, both for him and for me. Perhaps it was necessary to leave everything as it was, understanding now that at least his reading of history was incorrect. But still, I mean, it was so powerful to him that the likelihood of this woman could not be me, but only my sister, assuming that we are similar. It's powerful. That definitely is, to me, one example, if you wish, of what I tried to communicate when I said the importance of circumstances.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you for that window into those remarkable circumstances. And Catherine, I believe you might be able to give us a little more context about the history to which Claudia was just referring.
Of course. I'll give brief background about the military junta under which Claudia grew up in Argentina. During the Dirty War from 1976 to 1983, the government in Argentina, the military junta, targeted suspected dissidents, in which an estimated 30,000 people were disappeared. In 1983, after the fall of the military junta, investigations began into violations of human rights. A group of anthropology students from the university in Buenos Aires began working with Clyde Snow, a well-known US forensic anthropologist, in Argentina's first exhumations. Claudia's sister Patri was part of this group.
Thank you. And Catherine, could you describe your collaborative research process for the play? This relates to a question that an audience member sent to us in advance.
Oh, that's a great question. Yes, I had the opportunity to kind of excavate the subject by asking Claudia more and more questions and by listening. I just kept on digging deeper and to explore the dimensions of what I was learning and experiencing. So I did my usual reading and watching, which I always do with plays. As I mentioned in Belfast, I was listening to Claudia's stories. And then, as I had dreamed, Mercedes Herrero joined us. So as we developed the play, we became a triumvirate. And it became an adventure in collaboration. And I consider this play to be an act of friendship. Therefore, when we were working on it, Mercedes would read portions out loud to me, and she and I would discuss them from the point of view of her performing them. And there's just a lot to say about the process because it was a long and detailed and very rich process. I became focused actually on the use of props as a kind of guides, such as the edible flowers, the fabric, and what was hidden in the pockets, the orange. There were a few oranges, a skull, a cigarette, a hammer, a spoon, a perfume bottle. I mean, for me now, all of those objects are so meaningful. I know for an audience, it might sound like just objects. And then, of course, the use of the first person to bring history alive. And it was through the questions to Claudia that I fell in love with her description of juicio politico. It really changed my way of thinking. As you may know, I've been writing about plays that have to do with human rights and US complicity. And the framework that Claudia described to me for Argentina gave me hope.
Hope for what, if I may ask?
Sure. Well, hope for acknowledgement and accountability. And Claudia's beliefs, as I'm sure you can see, were infectious. And later you'll see footage of Claudia waiting outside the courthouse in Buenos Aires.
Claudia, would you like to take it from here for a minute?
Yes, sure. Years ago, I heard the Venerable Judge Richard Goldstone, who at the time was the special prosecutor in the case of ex-Yugoslavia and Rwanda in the international court tribunals. He was here at Berkeley and he was asked, "What is justice?" And he paused and said, "Justice is an attempt to correct an imbalance of power." And I thought that that was remarkable and extremely moving to me in the context of Argentina, because justice definitely is not about retaliation or about revenge. It is about comprehending that there has been a huge harm committed and that, if possible, there's a possible amendment through a legal venue to reduce the possibilities of that harm to be repeated. And I think that's exactly the case of Argentina. Argentina, after the military junta engaged, when the new democratic government was elected under the presidency of Raúl Alfonsín, to initiate the trials against the perpetrators of violations of human rights. Now, having consideration that Argentina at the time was putting on trial men that had been members of the military junta. They have been in power until months before. This is a huge effort of the law. But it was also the comprehension of how important this process was. So during the time of truth commissions in different parts of the world, where the language was about accountability, like Catherine says, and reconciliation, the language in Argentina from the beginning was, we do not forget, we do not forget, we do not reconcile. Nosotros no olvidamos, no perdonamos, no nos reconciliamos. And what does that mean? What it means is that we are not judging something that can be reconciliated upon. This is evidently a system of power that was the military junta, more than 8 years of people working for a very well-developed and organized process. There were a lot of people on payroll during the military junta committing violations of human rights as part of their daily chore. So to understand that from the beginning, this idea that Catherine was interested upon, to understand what is juicio político, what does it mean to put on trial the men that have committed these crimes, is not only an effort of the law in favor of justice, seen from the perspective of finding them responsible of violations of human rights. It's also an opportunity to reconsider historically that which must never be repeated, which is exactly what Argentina has conquered. It has been arduous of years and years and years. Who are the heroes of this process? Are, the mothers, the mothers of the disappeared, the grandmothers of the children born in captivity, the children of the disappeared, the human rights, different groups, the family members of the disappeared, people who have been part of this long journey towards justice, many, many years. It will take a long time. And when it is accomplished, it will take yet a lot of very astute vigilance for the process not to succumb. I like very much what Dr. Goldstone said. It is an attempt to correct an imbalance of power. I think when one thinks of justice, one needs to reconsider the constant effort, the constant attempt to remain in this process towards justice. And this is something that Argentina has explored in ways that I think other countries have not. So I think that is what Catherine was trying to get at when we were talking about juicio político and the ramification of that, what exactly that it means, not only for the crimes committed during the military dictatorship, but for the understanding that legally within the Argentine constitution, this will be a paradigm to understand how these same violations of human rights must never be repeated. And if they are repeated, they will be part of a judicial case. That is huge. And it's part, as I said, not only of the judges that were part of the reconceptualizing of the Argentine constitution, but a lot was due to the enormous effort, tenacity, and clarity of the human rights groups, of the citizenhood, who really remain vigilant towards justice.
Thank you so very much. We'll now move on to the second group of clips from the reading of the play. And these clips touch on the massacre at El Mozote and some of what both Catherine and Claudia just described regarding Argentina. Here they are.
Patri and the Argentine Forensic Anthropology team invite me to create the archaeological maps in El Salvador at a distant hamlet, El Mozote, where there had been a 1981 massacre. I make drawings identifying the locations of the found human remains, associated objects, and ballistic evidence. Rufina Amaya Marquez, the sole survivor of the massacre of El Mozote, saw her community being divided in groups, men, women, younger women, and children. She identifies a shallow hill, Cerro de la Cruz, where the Atlacatal battalion took the young women of El Mozote to rape them, kill them, and burn them. Rufina saw her husband being decapitated and could identify the voices and screams of her own children before they were shot. No one survives El Mozote. Only Rufina is left to bring the truth of an inconceivable massacre of a civilian population to us. Over 1,000 people perished at El Mozote in one day, December 11, 1981. All the found ammunition and ballistic evidence was manufactured in the US. No US military files have ever been provided. The exhumation takes place in 1992 inside a 35 square meter building known as the convent. The exhumation confirms the allegation of mass murder against civilians by identifying the presence of human remains of 143 individuals. 136 are children under the age of 12 with an average age of 6 years old. I have never before exhumed the remains of children. Some of the bones are so fragile, they resemble the bones of a small bird. The remains become a fine powder, a tender sawdust, at the moment they are collected from inside the tiny garments where they have been nestling quietly. The trace of existence would evaporate forever, and with it the presence of this child. What would it be like to return to El Mozote, to do art with children the same age as those we are exhuming? In Perquín, 2 miles north of the massacre site, I create Walls of Hope, a community-based project of art. The murals are always by community consensus. I am only the facilitator. I see the sole survivor, Rufina, arriving at El Mozote to look at the mural. I am astonished to meet Rufina in the place of the massacre to talk about art and murals. Rufina looks at the mural, perplexed. Is there something missing, Doña Rufina? Yes, coffee. The coffee plant is important to our community. It is bushy and has lots of branches where the coffee hangs down, where the little grains come out, red and green. Oh, excellent idea, Rufina. We didn't know what to put in that empty space. On a Thursday morning, I see a lot of children coming to the church. The whole school. When we are called, the children are standing, their faces radiant, and their small voices are singing to us in gratitude for the mural. The Perquín model has been successfully done in Guatemala, Colombia, Mexico, Argentina, Germany, Switzerland, and Northern Ireland. In Buenos Aires, there is a street that used to be called United States, with hand-painted letters mimicking the font used by the Argentine municipality. The street is renamed People of Iraq. We do not forget. We do not forgive. We do not reconcile. Juicio político. 20 years after the military junta received amnesty, we go back to square one and demand a referendum. Not only is the person put on trial, but the crime is, so that after the perpetrators and victims are dead, the crime is not. Aprender la lección de la historia debe ser no perder la memoria. In 2009, the trial reopens. We wait 8 hours outside of the court office, of the courthouse. Many of the generals receive life imprisonment. Como a los nazis les va a pasar, a donde vayan los iremos a buscar. Ole, 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 hola. A donde vayan los iremos a buscar. The trials continue to this day. Patri is still giving testimony, where a man is being given 7 consecutive life sentences. This is unique to Argentina.
Claudia, would you tell us just a bit? I know this is too huge a question for our short time together today, but would you tell us just a bit about what the impact of these experiences has been on your work as an artist? I'd also love you to speak with us, if you would, about the Perkin model, which you developed along with others.
Mm-hmm. When I was at El Mozote, as it was being presented here briefly through the clip, I was there as part of the Argentine forensic team, being focused on the exhumation. We had to be very focused, very professional, long days of work. There was something very physical about arriving to El Mozote and literally step into the place that had been the convent and spend the next 6, sometimes 8 hours exhuming. And most of the human remains we exhumed were those of children. And one needed to be very focused on that. So we did that. But of course, it remained present, the question that Mercedes produces here in the clip we saw, what it would be like to come back to this place and create art with children of the same age we are exhuming. It was an incredible question, an impossible question at the time. It was moving then and continues to be moving because there was this juxtaposition of life and death that one doesn't have answers for, only more questions. But for me, it was clear when I came back to the United States and I was aware that my perception about life, about Latin America, about history had changed, and not necessarily for the politics. I have always been, I think, relatively well informed about politics, but I think the experience, the physicality of being at El Mozote produced a change of paradigm. I think I was a different woman before El Mozote. I became a different person, a different woman, a different artist, a different educator, whatever different after El Mozote. And I must say also, it's not all based on the tragedy of El Mozote. I mean, that's one part, but I am so happy to be able to retain as well so many beautiful aspects of El Mozote, including prominently becoming friends of Rufina and understanding how Rufina continued to be the mother of Martita, a daughter she had many years after the massacre, and understanding the life of other people who were survivors of other massacres. So for me, the question when I was here in Berkeley, after I came back and I did art, I started working in installations. I had never worked in installation before. As an artist, my art was being impacted, not because I wanted to say anything about art or about art and politics, is because I have been transformed. To me, the feeling is as if I had a brain transplant of sorts, and then art became different because I was a different person. But the subtext of all that was that doing my own art was not sufficient. It was not what I needed to do. It took me a while to understand that what I needed to do is to go back to El Mozote and create art with the children of the same age we had exhumed. We couldn't do it in El Mozote because El Mozote was a crime scene, but Perkin, a community located only 4 kilometers north from El Mozote, is the place where the School of Art Walls of Hope was created. And that to me was a wonderful experience from the beginning, because I very much felt that this was not going to be a school as any other I had ever seen or be part of. This had to be a model created with the community. And this is how exactly it started, by having town meetings and conversing with the communities and ask them what they want and be respectful of the rainy season, the dry season, the planting season, the collecting season. It was a school that was free for everyone. The materials were given for free to the participants. Outside artists, more of my friends would come and give to the community what they knew. That is the Perkin model. The Perkin model is we as artists come to communities to offer what we know, hoping that we can create something together. And when we leave, do whatever you want, what we would have experienced together. That is, in essence, what the Perkin model is. And in relationship to all what we have been talking about, the play and the collaboration, I have to say that for me, the School of Perkin then and since has been a wonderful opportunity to consider poetic justice and to bring something beautiful among people who have survived calamities. So most of the work that we have done from the Perkin model's point of view and action has been working with survivors of political violence. That's the summary. We travel the world working with people who are willing to tell the stories and to make it visible. So for me, the work that Patri does and the work I do as a visual artist is an exhumation in both directions. If one considers the horizon, Patri works below the horizon. She looks through the earth and finds evidence of something that had happened to people who have been silenced. And I work above the horizontal line with people who are the survivors of the same calamities of the people who did not survive, but who are willing to tell their stories. And that is a beautiful gift.
Thank you so much, Claudia. I want to take a moment to acknowledge a comment from an audience member. Diana shares, I would like to express my admiration and love for these incredible artists, Claudia and Catherine, doing such amazing work. And she's grateful that you're in this important conversation and sharing it with the world.
Thank you. Thank you, Diana.
Catherine, after that very moving story from Claudia, did you want to talk a bit about theatricalizing the poetry of the piece?
Sure, yes. So our director, Elena Araoz, and our video designer worked intimately with us, Claudia and me, to create the dramatic world and to theatricalize the poetry of the piece. For me, the personal and the political are meshed. I think with the idea that we spoke about, that the characters came to the political through the circumstances of their lives and not by choice. And also there's an emptiness and a silence that I feel exists with the idea of the disappeared. In the play, there's an amazing situation with Claudia where she goes to an exam in college, and many of the students on the list for the exam that are supposed to be there are missing. They're just not there. And for the character, it's not yet apparent why they're not there. And for me, that's a moment that is very palpable, and also that makes me think about silence, which is something that Claudia and I have discussed in terms of how silence works in the play. And I think I would say theatrically that I found an artistic partner who, like me, pairs art and human rights, and that we both were able to expand our artistic disciplines through this process. And then Intar gave us the theater home to do the workshop, which is everything for me, because without a home like that, there is no theater.
Thank you. Claudia, might you elaborate a bit on the notion of silence that Catherine just introduced?
Yes, it was very challenging to talk about silence in the context of theater, because theater is about telling, right? And especially if it is a one-person show, it's totally understandable that the thread needs to be built on a quite rhythmical presentation of speech. But I have been defending from the beginning the times of silences, and I'm so thankful and so happy to have been working with Catherine and with Mercedes, and then with Elena, because they totally understood it, I think. So why the defending of silence? I think it has many layers. From the dramatic point of view, I think as the play and the plot evolves, there are certain moments in which I think it's more provocative, if one wishes to use that concept, to be quiet and calm and facing the audience in this semi-perplexity. That's one aspect. But the philosophy, so to speak, the root of the concept of the silence that I was trying to bring is that for me, and I think for my generation, we were left speechless for what happened. I mean, at the end of the military junta, when the trial started and the evidences of what had happened were presented, we were speechless. I mean, we could not fathom that had happened in Argentina. You know, I grew up thinking that Argentina was a country mostly of middle-class people, mostly, European descendant, mostly Catholic. All this is not true, but somehow that was fed in my imagination, although I am part of a generation that was very early, very active in politics. But somehow the recognition that we have lived in a country that for 8 years managed to commit massive massacres of civilians. And yes, these are the evidences. What one does with that information. I personally was speechless. Not that I had nothing to say, I had a lot to say about it, but we had to reconstruct a language. I had to reconstruct a language. The efforts of justice had to reconsider and reconstruct a language. It's really interesting if one thinks about that, because one continues to observe the necessity of the vigilance towards justice that incorporates the finding of a new language. So I think in my art as a visual artist, and what I think we were able to accomplish in the play is that there is not monotone. There are different highlights in my art. I am very aware that less is more, and that the best that can happen in the intimacy of a visitor to an exhibition or someone who looks at the art, in that intimacy between the viewer and the artist, there is this moment of silence, of wanting to understand not only what it is being said, but that which is deliberately not said. I think that is a strategy for the visual arts that I was trying and succeeded to share with Catherine, Mercedes, and Elena, and I am so very thankful that they accepted it. I did say in one moment, you know, if you were working with an author who was dead, you could do whatever the hell you want. But because the author is right here and she has a big tongue, this is what I'm saying. And they embrace the challenge, I think, and very thankful to them for that.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you to both of you, really, for all of these insights into so much that is very complex, very heavy, with reverberations, and you know, for this window too into the ways you created beauty in the world. We don't have so much time left, so we're going to switch our focus a bit and talk about the moving forward. Claudia, I heard that you're very interested in a publication that would go along with the play. What do you imagine a related publication would provide?
I am an artist who has been blessed by having been granted the opportunity to work in collaborations with artists who are not visual artists. I have worked with Daisy Zamora, who is a very wonderful poet from Nicaragua, and Kimi Okada from ODC in San Francisco Dance Theater, etc. This collaboration with Catherine and with Mercedes and with Elena is something so wonderful at all layers. We have crossed so many different stages to come to something that we all feel very proud of, that I think is something that students, mostly students and other artists interested in collaboration, would be very interested in reading. Concretely, as an educator, when we talk about collaboration, you see, the visual arts is it's opening up a little, but you know, the history of Western art is very solitary. You know, the idea of the artist working in solitude and doing art, which is wonderful. We all love working in our studio. But I think students and young artists are eager to find ways in which to collaborate with others. And I think I imagine this book as an opportunity to tell the how to, and you know, to communicate the different instances of this collaboration, to produce an invitation, perhaps, to contemplate how to work in collaboration with other artists. For me, is by far the most interesting way of working. Is my perception as a visual artist expands continuously by the presence of other artists being generous enough to share with me how they see the world and the world of art. So that's what I think a publication would be like.
Thanks. And Catherine?
Yes. So I would just add that I'm fortunate that Frank Stewart, who's the editor of the journal Manoa and a poet, and also Barry Lopez, who was a friend and part of Manoa, have published my work for many years. And Claudia and I are discussing a volume with Frank right now. The idea is that the text of the play will be featured in the journal, surrounded by other curated material, which would give context to the project. And the publication, I think, addresses, as Claudia says, how do we cross over artistic disciplines? For example, as a mentor, I've helped students to network across disciplines, and also to put historical and political perspectives in tandem with my work. And then I've often been told over and over that artwork can strengthen the study of human rights. So that, and the fact that both of us have, our work always has communal angles to it, I think are parts that would be components for the book.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Aside from a possible publication, what are next steps for the play itself?
Well, the next steps, Claudia has called one aspect of it the collaboration intermezzo. Our dear actress Mercedes, faced with family responsibilities, has taken some time away from acting. So we will need to find another actress, which is what we will do. And then also Claudia and I have changed a few parts of the script. We've changed the title of our play from Under the Skin, one of the reasons being that there's a movie by the same name. And we are going to call it How to Eat an Orange. And the reason being that when I was in Belfast having meals with Claudia, I was fascinated by the way Claudia ate an orange, which is with a fork and a knife. And it's a beautiful thing to see. And so the play begins with Claudia eating an orange and ends with that. So if you hopefully see the play at some point, you'll understand more about what I'm talking about. And as Claudia and I were talking about, we're also exploring how silence enters into the play. And then lastly, of course, COVID has affected our next steps for live performance, and hopefully that will be solved for all the worlds and for us soon.
Yes, indeed. Claudia, did you want to add anything else about next steps?
Only that I am trusting the process as we have trusted at all times. Everything that Catherine said is, where we are at. But we are also, I think, investigating how else to bring the play forward, maybe as we wait that COVID becomes eradicated from our preoccupations, and in order to remain safe, maybe there are other ways in which we could communicate and bring the plays or bring these kind of conversations around the play. So I think what we have been able to acquire is robust. It's something we all participants of the play feel very strongly about. It has an identity beyond Catherine and Claudia, which I think what is wonderful about art. It has a life of its own. And who knows, maybe there's something that the play wants that we don't know yet what that will be, but we are here to accompany the play and to accompany also the desires of the public. I think the more the play will have its own life, maybe there are opportunities that will come to the play and intrinsically to us about what other forms this may take. And I am so happy, I'm like, this is not my world. The theater is not my world, but it's becoming my world. And I'm extremely thankful for that to Catherine and to Mercedes and Elena. And now that Mercedes may not be the actor for a while, who knows? There's something else. There's new energy. So this to me is not the end of anything. It is the transition towards something that I trust will be beautiful.
Thank you. Thanks to you both. Wonderful, wonderful. We're going to focus now on questions and comments from the audience for a little bit before we close. And first, there's a comment I would like to share from Navida. Thank you, Claudia and Kat. I am so grateful to be at this seminar and hear both of you speak. I am inspired and deeply moved by your work and your process. I look forward to a full production of this one-woman show, and I so believe in collaboration and the extraordinary, unique work that can result, making me emotional, from this collaboration. Thank you. And Mercedes is amazing, she adds. And there's a question too, where can people see this play?
Well, that is the question right now. We are in the process of showing the play to people and trying to figure that out.
I will ask one more question. And this is about, I know COVID and all kinds of unknowns are out there, and you're changing the title of the play, and maybe there will be a publication to accompany it. Do you have any immediate plans for another reading, just like the one that was done and was recorded that we shared clips from?
I'm sure that we will have readings. This was a little bit different in the sense that this was a virtual workshop, and which ended with this virtual production that you saw clips from. And so I didn't consider it to be a reading. It was more produced than that, because we had a video designer and we did a lot of coordinating of different visual aspects and technologies. And I do also want to give a shout out to Culture Hub, which worked with INTAR using a program called Live Lab, which permits the possibility that we were able to do all of this with Mercedes in her house, and us all working virtually to create the play. Milton being, I believe, I want to say New Mexico, but I'm not completely sure, all around the country. So next time, it would be wonderful to actually get to be in the same room together and actually hug each other and touch each other. Yeah. So hopefully, yes, soon.
So in order to close, first I want to say thank you to Catherine and Claudia, to Susan and everyone at Ford Hall Forum, at Suffolk University, and GBH Forum Network, and everyone who helped with the production of this event. Thank you to audience members. And Susan, would you take it from here?
Thank you, Tony. And thank you so much, Catherine and Claudia. What a pleasure. Thank you all so much for your important work. Thank you for your play, Catherine. Quite an enjoyable afternoon.